There is a sound that anybody over 45 remembers if they grew up in the right house. It is the sound of a heavy oven door opening at 6 in the morning on a Sunday, and the rush of dry heat into a kitchen that already smells like yeast and flour, and something your body recognizes before your brain does. That smell is bread. 4 loaves of it, rising under a damp cloth on a wooden table, while your grandmother or your great-grandmother moves through a kitchen that does not contain a single thing she does not need. She is not following a recipe. She is running a system. And by the time that bread comes out of the oven around 8:30, she will have set into motion a sequence of moves so precise, so deliberately ordered, that every meal her family eats for the next 6 days is already accounted for. Every calorie allocated, every scrap spoken for. This is what fed 8 children on roughly $2 a week in 1932. Not magic, not luck, not some golden age fantasy where poverty was noble and suffering built character. It was planning so ruthless and so specific that a modern logistics manager would recognize it immediately. And the woman doing it learned some of it from her own mother and some of it from a county extension agent who showed up with a USDA bulletin and a meal planning template designed in Washington by a bureau chief named Louise Stanley, who believed, and she was right, that the family food supply is the first charge on the family income. What follows is what your grandmother did on Sundays. Not all of it, not every family, not every region, but enough of it, documented in enough places. The Library of Congress, WPA Oral Histories, the USDA Home Economics Bulletins, the Bureau of Labor Statistics price records from 1932 to 1935. That the pattern is not nostalgia. It is a recoverable discipline, and parts of it are more relevant to your kitchen right now than anything a grocery delivery app will ever teach you. Let me be honest about the money first, because the number in the title needs context. $2 in 1932 is roughly $46 in 2025 purchasing power, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator. That is not literally 2 modern dollars. But here is what $46 means today. The USDA's current Thrifty Food Plan, the bare minimum budget they publish, estimates about $225 to $275 per week for a family of 4. A Depression-era mother was feeding more than twice that many people on less than 20% of today's rock-bottom number. And that $2 was just the cash outlay at the store. It did not count the garden, the backyard chickens, or the jars she put up last August. The cash bought what the land and the labor could not provide. Everything else came from work. So what happened on Sunday mornings? Bread first. Always bread first. A 5-pound sack of flour cost about 15 to 18 cents. A single loaf baked at home ran 3 to 4 cents in ingredients. Flour, a bit of salt, water, a small amount of lard for texture, and yeast. She either cultured herself or bought for 2 or 3 cents a cake. 4 loaves cost her roughly 12 to 16 cents. 4 loaves from a store cost 28 to 32 cents. That 16 cents she saved was not a rounding error. That 16 cents was Tuesday's dinner. And the bread had a second life and a third life built in before it ever cooled. Fresh for Sunday and Monday. Day-old for toast and bread pudding by Wednesday. The stale ends dried, crumbled, and saved as breadcrumbs for stretching hash and binding whatever scrap meat showed up later in the week. Nothing left the kitchen until it had given everything it had. Now, here is where Sunday morning turned into something that would feed the entire week. The chicken went into the oven. A dressed chicken in 1932 cost about 65 to 90 cents for a 3.5 to 4.5 pound bird. That was the single biggest cash expenditure of the week, sometimes close to half the total budget. And that bird was not a single meal. That bird was 5 days of protein, and every day's portion was planned before the oven door closed. Sunday, roasted whole, carved at the table. The pan drippings saved in a jar. That was cooking fat for 3 days. Monday, cold sliced chicken on bread from Sunday's bake. The oral histories describe about 6 thin slices per child, and if you think that sounds lean, you are beginning to understand what tight means. Tuesday, chicken hash. Whatever meat still clung to the bones got pulled, diced, mixed with potatoes and onion, bound with a spoonful of dripping, and fried in a cast-iron skillet. Wednesday, creamed chicken on toast. The final scrapings of meat from the carcass, suspended in a white sauce made from flour, milk, and drippings, served over toast from bread that was now 3 days old and grateful for the duty. Thursday through Saturday, the carcass itself, cracked and simmered for 4 to 8 hours, became bone broth, the base of 3 consecutive vegetable soups, a different soup each day because the vegetables changed as the garden offered them up. 1 chicken, 5 days, 10 people fed. And the bones still had work to do on Thursday. That is not a recipe. That is an extraction sequence. And it is documented in USDA home economics publications from the era and in multiple WPA oral history interviews recorded while the Depression was still happening, not decades later when memory could soften the edges. Now, I want to stop here for a moment because somebody watching this is thinking about bone broth. It is sold in cartons at the grocery store now, and it is marketed as a wellness product. Let me tell you something your great-grandmother would find baffling. She did not call it bone broth. She did not sell it for $9 a cup at a storefront. She called it soup stock, and it was the base of 3 meals that cost her nothing because the chicken had already been paid for on Sunday. She added a splash of vinegar to the pot because someone, maybe her mother, maybe the extension agent, told her it helped pull the good out of the bones. Modern food science says the acetic acid aids in dissolving calcium from bone matrix. She did not know the chemistry. She knew it worked. And she knew it stretched a 65-cent chicken into almost a full week. Does bone broth contain beneficial compounds? Yes. Some gelatin, some minerals, some amino acids. Is it the superfood that the wellness industry wants to sell you? No. A 2017 analysis in Food and Nutrition Research found that the mineral content of bone broth is inconsistent and often nutritionally modest. But that does not diminish what your grandmother did with it. She was not trying to optimize her amino acid profile. She was trying to make sure nobody went to bed hungry on a Friday night in February. So the bread is baked. The chicken is in the oven. And now, the other Sunday moves begin. In a corner of the kitchen, or down in the cellar, there was a stoneware crock, brown-glazed, heavy, with a plate weighted on top. Under that plate, submerged in salt brine, cabbage was becoming sauerkraut. Cabbage in 1932 cost 2 to 3 cents a pound. Salt, a nickel for 5 pounds. The fermentation, lactobacillus bacteria converting sugars to lactic acid, happened on its own, requiring nothing but time and attention. The Sunday ritual was to skim any surface growth, check that the cabbage stayed below the brine, and put the weight back. The USDA published a bulletin on sauerkraut making in 1926 that laid out the process in detail. Every Sunday for 6 months, she checked that crock. 2 cents worth of cabbage and a spoonful of salt became preserved vegetables that lasted through winter. Near that crock, there might be a stoneware jar of water glass, sodium silicate solution. The USDA's Farmer's Bulletin 1756, revised in 1936, gave the formula. 1 part sodium silicate to 9 parts boiled and cooled water. You lowered fresh, unwashed eggs into this solution on a Sunday afternoon, and the silicate sealed the shell pores. The eggs stayed usable for 6 to 9 months under proper conditions. A cool cellar, 34 to 40 degrees. Eggs extremely fresh when they went in. 9 months. An egg laid in April, preserved on a Sunday afternoon, cracked open for breakfast in January. This worked because Depression-era eggs were unwashed. The natural bloom, the cuticle on the shell, was intact, and the silicate sealed over it. Modern commercial eggs have been washed per USDA regulation since 1970, which strips that bloom. If you want to try this technique today, you need unwashed eggs from a backyard flock or a farmer's market, and you need to consult current university extension guidelines before you start. The food safety landscape has changed. The principle has not. While the eggs went into the water glass, the lard was rendering. Not bought lard, rendered lard, from pork trimmings that cost 3 to 5 cents a pound at the butcher. Cut into small pieces, simmered slowly in a heavy pot with a little water until the fat melted clear and the connective tissue crisped into cracklings. 1 pound of trimmings at 4 cents yielded about 13 ounces of cooking fat. Lard that would have cost 7 to 9 cents a pound at the store. She turned 4 cents worth of scraps into a week's cooking oil. The cracklings the kids ate standing at the stove. And then there were the beans. Dried beans at 5 to 7 cents a pound provided the cheapest protein available, roughly 21 to 25 grams per cup of cooked beans at a cost that barely registered. Sunday night, she picked over the beans for stones, rinsed them, and set them to soak. By Monday night or Tuesday, they were ready. 2 meatless days a week, Tuesday and Friday, stretched the chicken further and kept the budget from breaking. Many Catholic families observed Meatless Friday as a religious matter. Plenty of non-Catholic families added a second meatless day for purely economic reasons. Navy beans one week, pintos the next, limas when the garden provided corn for succotash. Beans cost a nickel a pound. A pound fed 10 people. 2 meatless days saved her the price of a pound of chicken, which she needed for Sunday. Here is the move that ties all of this together, and it is the most recoverable skill in the entire list. Pinned to the kitchen door, or the wall near the stove, or sometimes tucked into the family Bible, was the meal map. Pencil on brown paper, usually the back of a paper bag. Days of the week down the left side, 3 columns across. Breakfast, dinner, supper. Every meal for every day listed. Not recipes, allocations. Monday breakfast, bread and eggs. Monday dinner, cold chicken on bread, beans soaking. Tuesday, bean soup, chicken hash. Wednesday, creamed chicken on toast, sauerkraut on the side. Thursday, vegetable soup on bone broth. And so on through Saturday. The USDA Bureau of Home Economics, under Louise Stanley, distributed meal planning templates through thousands of county extension agents specifically designed for families on desperate budgets. This was not folk wisdom handed down in whispers. It was a federally funded adult education program. Extension agents visited homes and taught classes. They showed women how to plan meals around what they had, not around what they wanted. That distinction matters. She did not plan meals around recipes. She planned meals around what she had. That is not a cookbook strategy. That is a logistics strategy. The meal map told everyone in the household, the mother, the oldest daughter helping with cooking, the father if he was home, exactly what was being prepared, what ingredients were allocated, and what could not be touched because it was reserved for a later day. In a house where no food could be wasted and no impulse eating was affordable, That piece of brown paper was the control mechanism. It was the budget made visible, the week made legible, and it started with a Sunday walk through the cellar and the garden. The garden was not a hobby. It was caloric infrastructure. The USDA published detailed kitchen garden bulletins showing families how to succession plant for continuous harvest. Lettuce, followed by beans, followed by fall cabbages in the same bed, maximizing every square foot across the growing season. On Sunday, she walked the rows. What was ripe came in. What would be ripe by Wednesday was noted. The meal map adjusted. Modern meal planning says, choose your recipe, buy the ingredients. Depression-era meal planning said, walk the garden, check the cellar, count what you have, build the week's meals from what exists. The garden fed the map. The map fed the family. That Sunday cellar walk was its own ritual. Checking the canned goods from last summer's preserving, the root vegetables stored in sand, the dried herbs hanging from the rafters, the sauerkraut crock, the water glass eggs, the lard supply. Every item counted. Every shortage noted. The Monday shopping list came out of that walk. Not a wish list, but a procurement document. What the cellar and the garden could not provide, the store would. And only what the store had to provide. The WPA oral histories describe women who knew the price of every item at every store within walking distance, and who walked to multiple stores to save a penny or two per item. A 2-cent saving on eggs, a penny on onions, a penny on salt. Across 8 or 10 items, that practice could save 10 to 15 cents a week. That was 5 to 7% of the entire budget, earned with shoe leather and arithmetic. Now let me be clear about something, because this subject invites a myth that does real harm. The myth is that Depression-era eating was nutritionally fine, that these families were healthier because they ate simply and wasted nothing. That is not what the record shows. The Public Health Service documented significant increases in pellagra, rickets, and general malnutrition during 1932 to 1935, particularly in the rural South. These mothers were brilliant at caloric extraction. They were working with tools and knowledge that could not overcome genuine scarcity. The Sunday system was ingenious, but it was not sufficient for optimal nutrition by any modern standard. The techniques were extraordinary. The outcomes were often heartbreaking. Both of those things are true at the same time, and respecting your grandmother means not pretending otherwise. So what do you take from this? Not the poverty, not the deprivation, not the idea that we should go back to 1932 eating. What you take is the discipline, the meal map. You can start one this weekend. A piece of paper on the refrigerator, not a Pinterest board, not an app, a pencil and a piece of paper listing what you have, what needs to be used, and what each day's meals will be. Plan from inventory, not from desire. Walk your kitchen first, then write the list. The extraction mindset. The next time you roast a chicken, do not throw that carcass away. Break it, put it in a pot with water and a splash of vinegar, and simmer it for 4 hours. You will have a quart of stock that costs you nothing. And that stock is the base of 2 soups this week. Your grandmother got 5 days out of 1 bird. You can get 3 without breaking a sweat. The waste audit. Open your refrigerator right now, not later, now, and count what is about to go bad. The lettuce wilting. The half-used jar pushed to the back. The leftovers from Tuesday. In Depression-era kitchens, nothing reached that stage because every item was allocated before it was purchased. The USDA estimates that modern American households waste 30 to 40% of purchased food. Your great-grandmother wasted close to 0, not because she was virtuous, but because she could not afford to. If you have done something like this, if you grew up with a grandmother who kept that kind of kitchen, or if you have started doing it yourself because the grocery bill keeps climbing. Tell me about it in the comments. What did she do that you still remember? What have you brought back? Here is the thing about that Sunday system. It was not one brilliant idea. It was 12 ordinary moves, done in order, done every week, done with a discipline that came from having no margin for error. Bread baked, chicken roasted, broth simmered, eggs preserved, lard rendered, sauerkraut checked, beans soaked, garden walked, cellar inventoried, meal map written, shopping list made from what was missing, not from what was wanted. And every move connected to every other move, because the chicken fat greased the skillet for Tuesday's hash, and Sunday's bread carried Wednesday's cream chicken, and Thursday's broth came from Sunday's bones, and the beans on Friday freed up the budget for next Sunday's bird. Your great-grandmother did not call this prepping. She did not call it meal planning. She did not call it food security. She called it Sunday. The Bureau of Labor Statistics can tell you what flour cost in 1932. The Library of Congress can play you the recorded voices of women who lived it. The USDA bulletins that taught the system are still archived, still readable, still startlingly practical. But none of that paperwork captures what the WPA interviewer in Tennessee captured in 1938 when a woman looked across the table and said, "Sunday was the day I fought for the whole week. I baked, I boiled, I planned. By Monday morning, every meal through Saturday was set. She fought for the whole week, and she won it, most weeks, on 12 cents worth of flour and 65 cents worth of chicken, and the kind of planning that does not require money. It requires attention. It requires a pencil and a piece of paper. It requires looking at what you have instead of what you wish you had. That is not a Depression-era skill. That is a permanent skill, and it is yours if you want it. Subscribe if you would rather have the skill than the stuff.